Welcome to Sparking Everyday Discipleship, where we disciple parents to disciple their children with everyday discipleship every day, sparking important conversations with our children. I'm your host, Terrie Hellard-Brown, and we're so glad you've chosen to spend some time with us today. We have some exciting guests with us today. It's my first time to interview two people at once. Erica Wingo and Dr. Blake is with us today, and they're from Financial Heirs. And they have a book that's available, a workbook for kids, and they talk about financial health. But that sounds kind of boring. Trust me, their program is not boring. Their program is so exciting, and I can't wait for you to hear all that they have to share with us today. We will have the links to their program in our show notes, but I can't wait for you to hear what they have to say. Let's jump in now and join the conversation. Hi, well, we're so glad you're with us today. We have two special guests with us today. Dr. Paul Blake and Erica Wingo are with us, and they have some exciting things to share with us today. I can't wait for you to hear what they have to share. Thank you for joining us, guys.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, you have a really unique program that I don't see anyone else offering, especially to homeschoolers, or you said even for those who are not homeschooling, your program can still work. And your company is called Financial Heirs International, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We're offering consultations or tutoring, we could say, to young people. And we also do consultations with adults. So regardless of your age, we can help you get moving with more of a generational perspective.
Okay, I love that because I feel like, especially among most of the homeschooling families and just Christians in general, if we haven't gone to school for business, we are not very overall financially savvy. And I think, especially, we're seeing so much poverty in the world as a whole today. This could radically change everything. And it all starts with a shift in our thinking. Can you address that? How do we need to change our thinking, first of all?
Right. First, I completely agree that this is a topic that is universal and yet somehow gets overlooked, which is really quite ironic, regardless of which field we're going into. Erica wants to be a homeschool mom and even a stay-at-home mom type of mentality. So regardless of what field we go into, money is a really, really, really important subject. And if our training is lacking in there, and if our implementation is lacking there, then we're all going to be quite frustrated. So that's one of the drivers behind what we do, is to help regular people who aren't numbers geeks like me or something like that. And they're looking to not really spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out money questions and do all of their different money things, but they're wanting to go and live their life. And so that's why we're here. And a couple of the unique things that we have offered. I went back to school to study this. My dad was a bit of an expert in this field and helped tons and tons of families. And so I grew up with all the 101 level information about this is what you probably should do with your money. These are the wise choices. This is how you would probably make and implement discipline in your life, these sorts of things. So I lived through all that. And then as an adult, realized that I wasn't very motivated to do it. I just knew it. So I actually found in the research that that's actually what happens, that they don't see a direct correlation between people that are trained necessarily and people that implement it out. Now, some of the studies will show that if you get trained, that you do implement out. And some of them contradict that. And they say, well, there isn't necessarily a correlation between learning and actually doing. So when I began to research, I tried to blend parenting and psychology and personal finance to try to figure out, well, how would we motivate people to actually make changes? So that was a bit of where we came from on all this, and ultimately came up with some ways to inspire people. And a lot of it was finding out what's universal. So here's an example. When you're looking for a job, oftentimes one of your main questions is, well, how much am I going to get paid? And I would like to get paid maybe every month or even more often than that. And until you find that information, you're not super interested in, well, do I want to take this job? And we found that young people are actually no different. So there's something universal about us as humans that wants to have a response really often and also wants to know how much I'm going to get paid. So we started to figure that out with kids and decide that, okay, well, then how do I incentivize them with money on a regular basis in order to introduce them to the adult world? So the adult world uses money as a system of reward and punishment. And we just mentioned how reward might be your paycheck, punishment might be a fine from the county government if you're speeding tickets, these sorts of things. So we introduced them to that, a system of reward and punishments based on money. And the more frequent that is, not once a year or something like that, but once a month. And that helps them start to begin to consider something. Well, maybe 2 weeks or 30 days down the road from now, I'm going to be glad that I have extra money, or I'm going to be sad that I lost money. Because when we start talking a year out, or hey, what about when you're in your 20s and you're going off out of the house, or what about retirement? Those are just too far out of the way, not only for kids, but oftentimes for adults.
That's very true. I was reading part of your book, Diary of a Genius Kid, and that's your main handbook for this program, correct?
Right. We use that for the 10 to 15 year olds and even older who are trying to understand, well, why would I want to invest? Because investing sounds rather boring. And it doesn't sound too exciting in any sort of sense, because if your motivation is to save for college, that's a losing motivation. Most kids don't like being in school. And so it's kind of discouraging to say, well, why don't you save up a whole bunch of your money so that you can go to school even longer?
Yeah.
And that's not really very cool. That's not really very motivating or inspiring. And so if you talk about retirement, it's even less inspiring. So that's why we pull things back to, all right, well, what if you got to spend the interest money that you're earning? And what if we didn't pay that out once a year like a bank might do, but we started paying it out once a month? And so every single month you'd get a paycheck and you would get the interest money that you've earned. So therefore your incentive is now, one, I need to go get a job, which is something that our culture is significantly lacking, is just
Yeah.
a very basic 101 level work ethic, regardless of our age oftentimes. And then secondly, it incentivizes them to, well, if I will invest that, then my paycheck will increase next month because I'll start to have more interest than I did last month. So I can see now that I've got two revenue streams. I have a job, and then I have this interest money that's coming in. And my job, I got a raise at because I was actually a good worker. My investments, I got a raise in because I kept putting more in there. And now I know that there are two places that money comes from instead of one.
Yeah, I thought that was so great about the book too. You emphasize that 1 month goal, and a child can wrap their head around that, like you said. I think that's so encouraging. What I also loved was your emphasis on, if I'm wanting to give a gift to someone, I now have money to buy that gift, because there's at least part of the population that the minute we start talking about money, they're thinking about greed, they're thinking about obsessing over money instead of looking at what a gift it is and what a tool it is to live out our Christian faith, to live out a life that is guided by stewardship and faithfulness and also wisdom and intelligence. And I just think you've done a really good job of balancing that and sharing a really solid lesson that kids can learn. And you said your book can either be one semester. So for those who homeschool, they could teach this whole unit as one semester. Or you said if they did once a week, they could do it in a year, which would be perfect for those families that are non homeschooling and still want to teach their kids this. And I can tell you from my own experience, we've been in the ministry our whole marriage. We've been married 40 years. And there's a poverty mindset in the church that pastors are supposed to be dirt poor. And my kids grew up with that. And my kids did not like that mentality because it was a struggle. And so my two daughters, especially, I have two daughters and two sons. My two daughters, especially, have really grasped the whole concept of how to save money, how to manage money, and be good stewards. And they have come to a really healthy place in their lives. They took very practical math classes that taught them how to budget and how to save. And I'm just so proud of them because I never had that. We never learned that in school. And I really wanted to make sure that my kids had that foundation. We also took some of them at church through different budgeting classes and stewardship classes. And I think every child should go through something like this. And I think your program is really, really unique. And I love it. So tell us what a typical consultation would look like. So if they get the book and they're going through the program, they then do a consultation with your company. Is that correct?
Right. So we offer a tutoring service, and different U.S. states actually will reimburse you for that if you're a homeschool family,
Hmm.
or if you just like to hire us as a tutor, then we do that. And we'll sit down on a call like this and we'll do a personal assessment of where the student's at. And we'll find out which class we feel that they need to take. And so we'll send them a free class. That's more like a 101 level information type of thing that,
Hmm.
people need to learn about different subjects and finance, et cetera. And then we'll also send them our book, the one that you referenced, if they're in that initial stage of trying to get their head around, well, what is investment interest? And should I try to spend this instead of my money and this sort of idea? And so we'll send them that book and they can use that as a semester tool. We'll send the parents our main book that's aimed towards adults to help them understand some of what's going on from a generational perspective, and they won't be surprised when junior comes to them and asks for some seed money to help get this investment started, or asks for a particular match. The adults are very incentivized by match and seed money. They've proven that through studies on 401k. So we follow that pattern, and junior might come to you and ask for a match, and every family will be different on how they respond to that. We encourage the kids to invite the grandparents, etc. So if there's not a lot of extra, money in the family, well, then maybe you're only pitching in $10 for every $100 that junior saves, but grandpa might pitch in some as well, et cetera, so that they get this idea that there's what we call free money, because no investment kid is super inspired by the word investment interest. It's a really good way to lose an attention span of an adult or a young person. So we throw in the twist in the story and we call it free money. And every time you mention free money in the conversation, it kind of re-alerts their brain, oh, maybe I should be listening right now. And it kind of helps them recenter on maybe this is important and maybe I should try to implement some of this if I'm getting free money. So, yeah, we'll have the adults go through a book as well. That's obviously optional. Different people maybe are experts in personal finance already and not find it helpful. But they're stories. Both of the books, or all the books, are written in story format with a moral at the end of the story and questions. So it's easy to go through quickly if you're an adult, or it's easier to remember if you're a child, etc. We'll also begin to help them dream and get motivated. So that's actually what we'll start the conversation off with. So that goes into left brain, right brain studies on how nobody really makes a lot of their financial choices out of their left brain, which is their logical side. We typically make those out of our right brain, which is our creative and dreaming and inspirational side. And so you've seen that in our own lives when we're listening to a pitch for missionaries that are working with the poor in a third world country and how challenging it is over there. And the emotional part of you kicks in of, wow, I have more than they have. I could give some. So that's your right brain kicking in and realizing, oh, okay, I'm feeling compassion, or I'm catching the vision of what they're saying, and I could donate towards that. So, yeah, everyone's the same in that sort of fashion. So, formulating a dream, for example, I'm working with an 18-year-old young lady right now, and she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's her goal. It's like, all right, well, then why don't you be disciplined with your money from 18 to 25, and then you'll basically have an enormous amount of money when you turn 25. And if you want to have a single income family with your husband working and you at home, then you're going to be completely fine financially. So getting that dream in place is one of the things that we'll do as well.
I just love that. That is so great. So you call it Heirs, financial heirs. What does HEIR stand for?
Right. So just a simple acronym. Ayres stands for helpful and generous, because we wanted to start there. I loved what you were saying about it's easy to fall into greed. It's easy to fall into, well, if money's my goal, then I should go become, a successful fill in the blank that earns hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, and this sort of idea, which some people might do, and that's fine if that's really what they get excited about. And other people don't. They are thinking, no, my son, he wanted to be a police officer and probably earn like an average American salary. And so it's all right, well, how do we help people that also want to live on an average American salary and go from there? So when it comes to being helpful and generous, Americans give about 1% to 2% of their income. And it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor, the numbers really come out about the same.
Hmm.
As believers, then oftentimes the number is around 10% or something like that. If we grew up in a culture where you believed in, giving to the Lord and that sort of thing. Ironically, when you look at the Old Testament, they gave far more than 10%.
Mhm.
So we're trying to challenge people outside of this mindset of, well, if I give 10 or 11% or something like that, then I'm finally off the hook, or some sort of mentality like that. And rather, oh, well, what could I do to really change the world through my giving? And the only way that we would do that is if giving was fun. We've kind of tapped into that mentality of how do I get joy out of giving? And one of the keys there is that if you're giving $20 a month to someone, then after a year or whatever, you typically get kind of bored with that. And it becomes more of, let's say, an auto payment out of your checking account or whatnot. And when you increase that, not by a dollar from $20 to $21, that's not a psychological barrier that increases any sort of satisfaction in your life. But when you increase it significantly, then you personally start to get joy again. I feel like I'm actually helping. I didn't give $20, I gave $40, or I didn't give 100, I gave 150 or 200. This sort of leap in the amount that you do. And it actually restores some of that joy experience that you get. You're feeling like you are making a difference. We're trying to help people understand that and start to move towards that and challenge themselves when it comes to how do I increase my giving? Because if I do the same amount every year, then I kind of lose interest and it's not even really a part of my mindset through life.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard that before. I love that. And I've seen it in our own lives because we've, like I said, been in the ministry forever. And so we've been pretty poor most of that time by American standards, I will say, because we did live overseas for a lot of that. When we retired, we're sort of semi retired, Dave got some of his inheritance. And all of a sudden, we had some money that we could actually go shopping and not freak out. And the best part of it was our prayer all those years on the mission field was someday, Lord, we would love to be able to bless people the way they've blessed us. And we've been able to bless people. And it has been so much fun. I have loved having some income, and we pray about how much to give and to what ministry. So we give beyond our tithe, and it has been a blessing and a half. It's just been so much fun. So I've never heard the psychology of that or understood that, but I've seen it in our own lives. And that's just so cool. And if we can equip our children to just grow up with that mentality and that understanding of God's blessing and how money works and all of that, man, we are really setting them up for success. I love that. What would you want our listeners to have as some of their takeaways from our discussion today? What would you like them to do? We'll have your links in the show notes, but what would you like to leave them with from the book they're reading and all of that?
Right. So maybe one comment on kids and one comment on adults. With the young
Okay.
people, we're trying to help them to consider this idea of living off their interest, and the adults sometimes can help inspire along that path. Secondly, I came up with it's a bit of a game that they can play of making $1 million decisions. And so those are two of the most unique things that we can offer, as well as I mentioned earlier, supplementing with all the basic information, the basic education that you might want when it comes to financial education. But when they start to play this game, we call it $1 million decisions. And most people don't think about making any sort of $1 million decisions. So we introduce that as far as this math equation that $40,000 at 25 will turn into $1 million when you retire. Nobody really thinks about that. But if it's true, well, then how am I going to spend $40,000 before age 25? How would I earn $40,000 before age 25? And just go through a series of about 25 questions to say, all right, well, if I choose the right amount of good choices, then I might come out $1 million ahead when I'm older. Or I might come out $2 million behind, or I might come out $3 million ahead. So what sort of a lifestyle do I want to live between now and 25 with these key choices? And as adults, we're incentivizing them to, well, you probably want to be on the positive side. And typically they recognize that, but how much positive? And so The plus three or the 3 million number is what they're really aiming for. And
Wow.
because of all the inflation that's going to happen and all the crazy government things that might happen in the next 50 to 75 years. And so, if that's the idea, what sort of a lifestyle should I live? So, we help with that. It's very practical in the sense of, all right, he's asking me crazy questions about $1 million, but these are simple questions. Do I want to have a job while I'm in high school? These sorts of questions, very tangible. I can answer that question. And how do I come up with a plan? So that's one of our tools that we use with young people. Nobody has that out there. Nobody has this idea of living off their interest, because I had to go and research that and find that nobody even talks this language. And
No.
so maybe it should be introduced. Secondly, with the adults, we can help adults with their questions. And what I actually would encourage most people is to talk with your employer about getting this added as an HR benefit, part of your employee benefits package. And then you don't have to pay for it.
That would be nice.
Employers are often super motivated. Pastors are often motivated to have this as a part of their congregation, because employers want their people to be financially stable. Pastors want their people to be financially stable. So there's different ways that you can actually get some of the help that you're hoping for as an adult with your personal situation and not necessarily have to pay the consultation fee.
That's awesome. Okay. Okay. One of the things I noticed also in your book, you mention jobs all the time with kids, and even like 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. And so when we hear the word job, we think like going out, finding an employer and working for a company or something. But you're very clear with a kid's mentality that a job could be mowing a lawn or doing something like that. So when you talk about jobs, just kind of clarify that for the people listening, what you're meaning by having a child have a job. Because in our mentality, a 10-year-old working seems odd. Overseas, children do not work if they're in school. They do not work until they're graduated, because school is, the thing, especially in Asian countries. If they're working, it's because they aren't in school and they're so poverty stricken, they're just trying to get food. So, how do we explain that to children, what we're meaning when we say job?
Right. Yeah, we can start with your third world example. I've been to India several times on mission trips, and they go to school 6 days a week, and they have tutors after school and this sort of
Yes.
idea, because they're trying to escape poverty. So as we're informing our kids about this is how life is in other countries, that you were actually busy. They may not have had a job, but they were very busy as they grew up in India. Or for us, a generation ago, and for thousands of years before that, people did work.
Yeah.
Young people did work. They had an enormous amount of chores on the farm, or they had jobs just like all of my generation and before had jobs. You started working as soon as you possibly could, at age 7, at age 10, at age 15, this sort of idea. You might earn a lot more at 15, but you were starting way before 15. So helping them recognize the generation they're growing up in is the exception. In all of history, their generation is the exception, that you would get out of school at 3 and you would play after school, and then you'd play all weekend long. That's pretty unusual. And so when that starts to sink in, it's like, well, then maybe it's because we parents are paying for every single thing that they kind of ask for, and they don't need a job. They've got no incentive to go actually decide to start working. And so part of that is on us. As we have them start to pay for some things, they'll think, well, I guess I need to get a job because all my friends do this and I want to do this too. Therefore, maybe I need to work. So, yeah, as you mentioned, young people can do lots of things, whether it's around the house or whether it's in the neighborhood. There's an enormous number of jobs they can do without getting employed somewhere. And as we do consultations, we can get into how that actually helps them with their Roth IRA, which most people don't know that kids can have a Roth IRA.
I did not know that.
Right. Most people don't know. And I didn't know, and went and asked my professional financial planner why he didn't tell me that. I was not very happy about that. So there's reasons why he didn't tell me about that. And I was not happy about that either. So there's a path forward for young people in that sort of sense. Not that they're, again, going to care that they have a Roth IRA, or not that they're going to want to put their money in there, but it helps you figure out how to parent through that situation of how do I inspire a kid in this direction.
Yeah, and I love in the book you have very practical examples that I know my children would have related to at those ages about I want a new video game, and so saving up for that rather than jumping in and spending that money when you could invest it and then buy it from the interest. And the shift in thinking again is where it's at, but it also appeals to where a child is thinking, video games or a toy or a trip or whatever. Like a parent giving an allowance to a child. What do you feel about those kinds of things
Right.
where we just give an allowance?
Yeah, that's a little bit interwoven with the Roth IRA question. So, an allowance just because is typically not a great way to motivate anybody. If you're just giving them money for fun, then that oftentimes maybe defeats the purpose. You're trying to teach them something of how do you get money? Well, you typically get it from working or from doing something. So, an allowance could be for things that are not related to the Roth IRA. So, the Roth IRA allows people to put money in if they're working. And if you're not working, then you cannot put money in there. So, you have to start to justify, all right, I want to prove for tax purposes that I'm working. And secondly, they have definitions behind that. And this gets into the question of allowance. So, you might give a kid an allowance for dumping the trash or making their bed. These are tasks that might take 60 seconds or something like that. And you can't consider that work. Their definition of work for legal purposes is that there's a competing American business. So you can't hire somebody to come make your bed. There's no business that offers that to American citizens. So you're not really doing legal work. But something like mowing the yard, there are competing American businesses to that. So that does count as work that you could have as income. And it actually pays an enormous amount compared to making your bed. So you're trying to help the young people recognize, well, yeah, we might give you a quarter if you make your bed all week long or whatever your incentive plan is. But if you actually want some real money, you're going to need to get a real job. And so distinguishing between, all right, well, house cleaning. Well, yeah, people pay for that in America because it takes a long time. And if you're going to clean the whole house, yeah, I'll pay you for that.
Yeah.
And so that's a bit of your mindset. There's just an enormous number of ways that we can have money be an incentive to young people. And if you're concerned, one of the concerns that parents have is that my kid might be getting too much money. Well, then that's actually pretty easy to solve. Just start having them pay for some of their clothes and start having them pay for
Yes.
some of their other expenses. And now all of a sudden they're learning how to budget, even though you didn't have to teach them budgeting.
Yeah, that's genius. I love it. And that's the title, Diary of a Genius Kid. So, Erica, as a mom or future mom, are you a mom now or are you going to be in the future?
I'm a mom now. I have a 4.5-year-old son.
Okay. And you want to be a homeschooler?
I do. I
So,
do.
how has this helped you in preparation for that?
Well, I already kind of started our own little family bank, even though he's 4.5. My husband will give him $5 if he helps mow the lawn, for example. And I'm already teaching him, we have this little piggy bank for you, but you have your own bank account too. And so this money, you won't see it here, but we're going to keep it safe for you and make it grow so that by the time you're older, you'll have even more money. So he's a little young because 7 is usually the age that they're kind of grasping bigger money concepts. But you can put it in very simple terms, even at 4.5 years old, that
Yeah.
they're kind of like, okay, I'm not going to see this money, but mommy says it'll be safe. Okay. So you kind of help build that trust between you and your child when they're younger with money. Even if it's a quarter, I say, okay, go put that in your little jar. You don't want to lose it. So just teaching that, the money is valuable. And like if he breaks something, I say, one day you're going to have to pay out of your own money to replace some of these things that you break around the house, things like that, just to kind of get his mind getting to that point.
Mm. That's really good. I remember when my kids are little, the same thing, keeping the money safe for them. And it was there when they needed it for whatever they were saving it for. But I love that because I don't know why it is that it seems in the Christian community we really struggle with money. And I know the Bible talks a lot about money and we're afraid of it. I don't know. There's just an unhealthy attitude a lot of times. And we've worked with workshops in our churches trying to help us all have a healthier attitude about it. But I love that because we can start when our kids are young, whether we're homeschooling or not, with that attitude, with that mind shift and getting them prepared to at least have a healthy relationship with money, even if they don't become wealthy. I think what a gift we're giving our kids. One of the things that I love about homeschooling, though, that I'm really seeing a lot more people grabbing onto now is we look at where our kids are in their personalities. And like you said, with your consultations, you look at the situation with the whole family and the interest of the children, but we can help prepare them even for their future career. We're helping them to know who they are, what God has created them for, how He's created them. We're helping them when we put these two parts together for success, but also to see the path that God's leading them into. And I just think this is so amazing. We're equipping a whole generation. If we really get this going, we can equip this next generation to really not only know what they're doing, but to serve God well. And I love that. We're getting rid of a lot of the fear, a lot of the dysfunction that has been in the Christian mindset when it comes to money. So I'm just so thrilled about this program, if you can't tell. And when I talked to Erica, I met her at one of the homeschool conventions, and I just got so excited as you were talking with me, and I saw your card and was reading about it. I thought, we need to have you on the podcast. This is going to be so good. This could be life-changing for families. So
Right. I
I'm
think one
just
of the things
thrilled.
that the parents will be excited about is that, as we're saying, the research doesn't necessarily communicate that if someone is trained and educated in this field, that they're going to implement it.
Yeah.
And some of the experts in the field are actually Jewish authors, and they're a little bit more open to talk about their faith in their professional writing.
Hmm.
And what they've argued for, a few of them, is that your character traits are the reason. You trained yourself in this field, but your character traits are lacking. You're lacking patience. You're struggling with greed. You don't have the self discipline that you need. You don't have the faithfulness and diligence that you need. You're struggling with fear issues that make you panic and make impulse decisions. And so, as believers, we can look at this and say, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. I'm actually trying to develop the character in my child or in myself that's lacking. And the fruit of it is financial chaos, or maybe just not being where I want to be. Maybe I want more flexibility in my life so I have more choices. I think as parents, that's what we want. We want our kids to have choices to get into a field that they enjoy.
Yeah.
So if that's true, well, then let's set them up with financial success so that they have some of that flexibility to take a job that doesn't pay as much.
That's great. No, I love that. My younger daughter, she's working in the Bay Area in California, making, from what our perspective is, huge amounts of money because it's so expensive to live there. It evens out, in my opinion, because she makes more money, but she spends more money just to live. We live in a lower cost area. We make less money and it works out. But the point is, she feels called to missions and she wants to go serve overseas, but she wants to finance herself. And
Mhm.
that's something new too. This generation thinks a lot more about that. Having that financial ability, that flexibility to work, 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 save, 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 and then live off that interest, live off that free money to do the ministry God's calling her to. I never would have thought that way. You know, our generation never thought that way. We thought of finding a mission organization to send us or whatever. But I love this. And I've talked to more and more younger people who are coming up in the generation just under us or just younger than us who have this new way of thinking about things. This program would work fantastically well for helping equip kids to be able to then when they're adults do missions or whatever. It just gives us flexibility to obey God without that angsty feeling or hesitation. We'll have more freedom. And I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's actually really important. It's something that I've walked through too, that nobody mentored us towards
Yeah.
having two jobs. They mentored us towards, well, this is your career, whether
Yeah.
it's going into the marketplace or going into ministry or whatever. But they didn't tell you, well, what if you actually enjoyed doing some of both? Whether that's simultaneously and having two jobs all year long, or whether that's going, like you're saying, work for 3 or 4 years and then go do something else for 3 or 4 years. We weren't taught that way. We have to retrain ourselves as, okay, well, then what if I'm wired that direction? What if I'm actually good at that? What if God is actually asking me to do something like that? And then we realize, oh, that's right. This is how the world functioned for centuries. Paul was a tent maker, and people in other countries do this constantly, but it's us in America over the past century or 2 centuries that live differently. And so I'm just trying to reshape my brain toward what's actually more universally common.
Yeah. We didn't have the concept even of childhood a century ago. That's been a new concept since the 40s, is what I understand. Have you read the book Do Hard Things?
Mm-hmm.
I can't think who wrote it, but yeah, they're two brothers that wrote that. And they talk about that we have a whole different mindset here in the States than the rest of the world. The concept of being a child and being taken care of and not having to contribute is brand new. It is not something that's biblical or that's been in our mindset for that long. And I think God is really raising up a lot of Christians like your organization and their book. I've even talked to some others that it's changing that mindset and it's bringing us back to, I believe, a biblical mindset. Another person was saying the Bible teaches a day of rest, not a weekend of rest, not years of rest, but a day of rest where we spend our time worshiping and fellowshipping with other Christians. And yet we've given ourselves days off way more than we need to. And so what my husband and I started doing is using our Saturdays to do entrepreneurial things and I started writing my books because I was still teaching, and then I would write my books and things on the weekend. And I thought I need to use that time in a positive way, whether it's through ministry or making money. And that was my goal, is to start doing things that would make some income and generate some income. And it's been amazing because there is that love, that delight, that passion for what we're doing on those weekend jobs. And Dave had like 3 jobs when we came back to the States from our mission work. We both just had lots of work and there was a satisfaction in that. So yeah, we've tried to teach our kids the same thing. A work ethic and working is good, and it gives you a sense of purpose besides the money, just a sense of purpose and that you're doing something important.
Yeah, and we can be super effective for the Lord in the marketplace.
Yeah, true.
It could be that, like you're saying, you took multiple jobs. One of them you found really purposeful and you found
Hmm.
satisfaction. You felt like you were making a difference in these people's lives, etc. And then another one, maybe you just did it because it paid well and you needed that to supplement this other job that you felt really a lot of satisfaction out of. And by combining those two together, it's working for your family in that situation. Some of it is just being more creative. And really, the economy is driving people to think that way anyway. So I think that's why the young
True.
people have already started to consider that. And
Yeah.
they're either going to stumble through or hopefully get someone along that can encourage them and motivate them. Hey, you're not being irresponsible because you're doing this. This actually might be a really great path.
Yeah. Well, I'd like each of you to answer. Is there something you'd like to leave our listeners with before we go today?
Yeah, I was hoping to mention, and Erica can touch on the opposite side of this, about how most people aren't really geared toward the logic or the math or,
Mm.
let's say, being extra self disciplined. So, the program that we do and the tutoring that we do is really designed for everyday people. And these are not concepts that we will make complicated. These are very simple things that we can explain to anyone. Anybody can understand this. A few people may already be good at this on their own, and that's great. But the vast majority of the population is looking for maybe how do I get over the hump?
Mm.
And we can simplify things and help along the way. But I wanted Erica to touch on that because she has a background in public health. And if you could kind of speak to that dimension, maybe even explain what public health is, since that's an unusual phrase.
So, public health is pretty much anything that has to do with the health of the public, of a society. The health departments, what they do for their low income clinics. I actually worked overseas in Cameroon, West Africa, in an HIV clinic. So, public health, they implement laws like seatbelt safety laws, child chair safety laws. So, public health is a really huge umbrella, and there's multiple divisions under that umbrella. And one of them I've always been interested in is financial health, which is not taught in my public health classes. We learn about, the socioeconomic status differences and access to health and good health care. But anybody that's at any income level can benefit from what Dr. Paul has received from the Lord for this specific subject. So just because someone hasn't gone to college, it doesn't mean they can't understand what it is we would be guiding and teaching through. So I didn't go into school for finance. I did public health. And this is something that really touches at the core of financial health for families is resilient working, saving most of what you make, living off of that investment interest, helping the next generation. Like my son will have a much better start financially than I ever did. And I had a much better financial start than my parents ever did. So it's really a generational approach. It's legacy building, it's life changing between the generations. And it's also a way for grandparents to get involved. Also, like my parents want to leave an inheritance for myself, my brothers, and our children. But this is something that they can be giving along the way for it to make even more of an impact later in life. So instead of just a lump sum when they're gone, this is something that as they're matching investments or seed money, like that's part of an inheritance they're already building while they're still here and
Yeah.
involved in the family. And I love that aspect. So this is a very simple concept to understand. And we're here as the consultants and the educators to help along in that process to get families on that track, no matter what level income they really are at. There are ways to save that people don't realize.
I love that. And I love the idea of having that inheritance now where they get to see the results. They get to see the benefit that their little gift or whatever is doing. That's
Mhm.
great.
Yeah, the research on grandparents is interesting because the more the grandparents interact with the grandkids, it actually is beneficial to the grandparents' overall well being as well as to the grandkids' well being. And so we should be looking for those sorts of touch points. Parents are maybe busy and grandparents can get involved and help out in this sort of fashion. It's a beautiful thing when you see that there's a lot more benefits to it than just money.
Yeah.
And it's not time consuming. It's like under
Mm.
3 hours a month on average. It's something that you can sit down and start doing very small steps. It doesn't have to be this grand, long, all day thing. It's simple. It doesn't take a lot of time. And there's a lot of ways to simplify it that we can help with.
Oh, that's great. Well, I love that. So tell us where we can reach you guys. I'll have that linked in the show notes. Where can we get in touch with you?
Right. If they go to our website at financialheirs.com, then we can start figuring out what might work for each family.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I hope a bunch of people contact you because I think this is brilliant. I hope we really do see a change in people's thinking and a shift in world changers, raising world changers through something like this. So thank you so much. And I just thank God that He gave you the ideas to start doing this. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us, Terrie. Blessings.
Thank you for spending time with us today. If we sparked any questions or you want to share a comment, we would love to hear from you. I want to also let you know about our discipleship coaching groups. We talk about those quite a bit, and we have a new class we would like to let you know about. So, first of all, for the class, if you have my handbook for parents called Up, Down, and All Around, we have a class to go along with that handbook for parents. In this class, we talk about the handbook and how to use it, but we also give you principles to become better disciple makers with your children, with those in your church. We talk about how to really do this discipleship making thing, this disciple making process that God has called us to. And we have a live session. It's a 6-week course, and you can ask questions, bring your questions and concerns or how to's to the class, and we will address those and talk together. So, this is a 6-week live session on Zoom class for parents who want to learn how to be better disciple makers, especially discipling their kids and especially using Up, Down, and All Around. It's called Disciple Well, and you can link to that. I will have the link in the show notes. You can link to it on my website. But we would love to have you join that and see if we can help you and encourage you as you journey forth in helping your kids grow in their faith and become followers of Christ. Then we also have coaching, ongoing coaching for parents because, this parenting job, sometimes we need some help. And it is so worth it to find a mentor or someone who you can talk with about anything that's on your heart. And if you don't have that in your life, we're providing that to the best of our ability through a once a month or twice a month Zoom call. You send your questions in a week before. My team strategizes answers and strategies for you to use to conquer whatever issue you're dealing with, whether it's something simple about curriculum or it's something very heavy about a child who's starting to deconstruct. We want to be there with you. You don't have to do this journey alone. And of course, you have God with you always, and He is giving us wisdom and guiding us and helping us to discern how to best lead and raise our children. But if you need another voice, you need some counsel that would help you along the way, we would love to walk this journey with you. So you can check that out on my website as well. We do offer one free session so that you can see what we do and see if it's something that you would want to join that would be beneficial to you and your family. We invest so much in our kids' lives. We spend so much money just on food, especially as they become teenagers. We spend money on curriculum. But sometimes we need to spend some money and really invest wisely in knowing how to do this job that we've been given and to have the kind of community around us that we may not have in our local co-op or even in our churches, because maybe in those we don't have the freedom to talk about everything. The wonderful thing about our Zoom groups is that you send in the questions early, like I said, and we come to the meeting and I read the question and the answer. So even if it's something you don't want the world to know you're dealing with, they don't have to know. It's anonymous. So then everyone in the group, other parents, and you'll find over and over again that we're often dealing with a lot of the same things, or some of us have already walked through something that you're going through now. And we can all join together as a supportive community to ask further questions, dig deeper, or to even share what's worked as we went through a similar situation. So it's a wonderful opportunity for parents to come together, moms and dads, in a like-minded community. We have prayer partners, parenting challenges, and a lot of fun as we talk together in our groups. So check that out. You'll have the link in the show notes. You can go right to it. Sign up for that free session. Let's see how God is leading and if this is an investment that would be really beneficial to your family. And of course, you can find the information about financial Heirs and this organization. I just love what they're doing. I think it is so needed in our world today. It helps us as parents to raise our kids to not only be healthy financially and have a great attitude toward money and stewardship, but to be world changers, because we've empowered them to be able to have the financial needs met and to have extra income that they can use to honor and bless God and bless people in the world. So let's raise world changers who are going to make a difference in the world for God and not be bound by poverty or fear. I'm so excited about what Dr. Blake and Erica are doing. I just was so thankful that God allowed us to meet at the homeschool convention. I hope that you can check this out, that it will bless your family for generations. I mean, we're setting up a legacy here. This is exciting. And as always, most of all, we pray you feel empowered, equipped, and encouraged to walk by faith and to embrace everyday discipleship every day with the people in your life.